Hey, friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Leather and Lace podcast, where I explore the sacred tension between the physical and the spiritual, between body and spirit. I'm Joanna, and this week I am sharing a recent unexpected heartbreak that, for whatever reason, became part of my journey. I'll get right into it after this. Welcome back. As I mentioned in the intro, this week I am opening up about a very deeply personal experience, something that happened just last month, right as I was launching this podcast. So, perfect timing, am I right? Speaking of the podcast, please spare a few milliseconds and click that like button and subscribe to the channel because it really helps to build the channel. And if you resonate with my intentions and what I'm sharing, I really hope that you do that. So thanks. Okay, back to my story. Okay, today, though I share a very sad personal story with you, I think what's more important is that I also share with you its blessings and its wisdom. Okay, so last February, I found out that I was pregnant. And though this would be exciting news for a lot of women, for me, I felt more shock and awe than I did joy and excitement. This is because I didn't want to have any more kids. I was perfectly happy with just having my 9-year-old daughter who was growing increasingly independent by the day, which I loved. Plus, this was a shock to me because at 43 years old and having lost a fallopian tube due to a ruptured ectopic pregnancy back in 2014, getting pregnant was highly unlikely. So I didn't even think that birth control was necessary. Plus, I admit that in the highly unlikely case that I were to ever get pregnant, my plan was to just get an abortion, without even telling Robert, my longtime wonderful partner, so that he wouldn't have to grieve the loss. So even as a spiritual seeker, I felt that abortion would have been an acceptable option for me. But when the time came, when I was actually faced with the situation, I couldn't do it. Now, before I go on, I want to be clear that I am only sharing my story and what I experienced, and my story is not meant to make any moral statements about abortion because that decision is made on a personal basis based on individual circumstances. Though I am completely pro-choice and I'm very passionate about people, not just women, having autonomy over their bodies and their lives, over the last several months since last fall, I was also becoming much more reverent for the sanctity of life, both in and out of the womb. Okay, since last fall, I had been much more open to listening to conservative media and influencers as a way to break out of my liberal echo chamber. I think I speak for many of you, hopefully, when I say that I am like starving for the center, because that, I think, is where we're going to be able to find peace and understanding with each other. The hyperpolarization in our country is serving nobody, no one. And I want to do what I can to not feed into it. Anyway, in my openness to differing perspectives, I did develop a higher reverence for life, particularly about life that is still in the womb. So shout out to Charlie Kirk and Candace Owens. It's totally your fault. And of course, conveniently, I got pregnant not too long after this shift in perspective, even though I had been off the pill for over 6 years. Weird, right? Okay, universe. So I just couldn't go along with my original plan to silently abort without at least telling Robert about the pregnancy first. So I let him know that I was pregnant, and I also expressed to him my fear and my reluctance to continuing the pregnancy because it would totally change our lives. I mean, we love our free time together and the freedom that we have to play pickleball for hours on the weekends like a couple of nerds, whenever we didn't have our daughter. And I loved the freedom to just completely veg out in the evening, And I also told him how happy I was about how independent Isadora was getting and how terrified I was of having to start over with a new baby. If you know, you know. Raising a baby is hard work. Anyway, long story short, we talked it over, and I went within. I meditated. I pulled a few tarot cards for guidance. Okay, I pulled a lot of tarot cards for guidance. All the things, and we eventually got to a place where we opened our hearts to becoming parents to this sweet little soul who miraculously found its way to become life inside of me. And I learned to embrace it, to dream about it, to want it, and to love it. And then, with reckless abandon, we shared our news with a few friends and family, and we were so deeply nourished by their excitement and joy for us. Though we did let them know that we were still in the early stages of the pregnancy, which meant that there were no guarantees. 2 months into the pregnancy, it became clear that it wasn't viable. Within days after witnessing its tiny little heart beating on the ultrasound monitor, we had to make peace with the fact that the baby wasn't going to make it. And of course, staying on theme with perfect timing, the day my miscarriage started was on Isadora's birthday. Now, I don't even know if I have the words to describe what that was like, feeling and experiencing the death of one child on the same day that I was celebrating the birth and the life of the beautiful child that made me a mom for the first time 9 years ago. But it was heavy. It was really, really heavy. It just felt like life and death were just there with me in the room, looking at me in the face, and just reminding me of how intertwined they really are. It was like every breath I took held both deep grief and such immense gratitude at the same time. Yeah. So what did I learn from this? What specks of gold can I mine from this huge pile of shit? Well, I have 3 lessons that come to mind. Lesson number 1. Faith is the key to peace and healing. For a long time, I had a fractured relationship with the word faith. Being raised as a fundamental Christian, faith just was not something that made me feel held or loved. Instead, faith was tied to fear, to guilt, to having to believe and have faith in salvation because I was inherently sinful. Now, that kind of faith did not make me feel safe. It just made me feel ashamed and scared. And then when I began to see the hypocrisy in so many of the people who preached this message, I became an atheist for many, many years. Please know that I have nothing against Christianity in spite of my negative experiences with the church and some of its followers. In fact, I think the faith and their followers are shifting Christian culture these days to be more about the love and kindness that Jesus preached rather than the accept Jesus as your savior or go to hell gospel that Paul preached. And I think that's a great thing. And to be fair, as an atheist, I was still able to find meaning in life. I found it in the impermanence of life. I believed that because death was final, the only logical thing to do was to seek joy and to live fully and avoid unnecessary suffering for myself and others. There was a kind of freedom in that I did not have when I was in the midst of Christian dogma. But there's only so much you can explain with logic before your soul just craves for more. Long story short, after years of being atheist, I had a spiritual awakening during the COVID shutdowns. And that was when my relationship with faith began to heal. Not the kind of faith rooted in dogma or fear, but a deeper kind of faith that was grounded in love, in trust, and in design. I now believe that everything I've experienced and everything I will experience, including this miscarriage, has been architected with meaning and designed by love, even though it hurt. When I found out I was pregnant, I was terrified. What if something's wrong with the baby? Will our relationship even survive this change? Are we too old? Can we afford it? Do I have to give up my work, my freedom, my sense of self? I had so many questions. And really, if I was to be honest, these questions that I had were actually reasons disguised as questions that really were just telling me to go ahead and have this abortion. But instead, I chose to trust life. My faith that everything has purpose and meaning reminded me that whatever the outcome, it would serve my growth in some way. So now, when life gets hard, like it did last month, I just meet the moment with curiosity rather than resistance. Because if it's all part of my evolution, my commitment to faith tells me that there is nothing to run from, only something to receive. Now, if you're listening to this, especially if you struggle with the word faith because maybe you had a bad experience with religion as well, or maybe life has just felt so randomly brutal and unfair to you, I want to offer you this. There is a kind of faith that doesn't require a church, a doctrine, or some other middleman, okay? Faith can be a quiet knowing, a deep trust that your life has meaning and that nothing you ever go through is wasted. Lesson number 2, you cannot control life. As a spiritual seeker with a history of anxiety, I used to believe that if I could just control everything around me, then I would finally find peace. And for a while, control does feel like peace. You know, it gives structure, predictability, and a sense of safety. But that safety is quite fragile, right? And it takes so much work to maintain it. Why? Because it isn't real. Eventually, I have to confront the truth that control is the illusion of peace. And real peace only comes through the sweet and terrifying act of surrender. So these days, I do my best to just flow with the go and to trust life and to know that life knows the way, even when I don't. But here's the thing. To flow with life isn't just something you choose to do one time and then you can coast on forever in peace and harmony. No. The choice between flow and control shows up over and over again, like it did when I had to decide whether to keep my baby or to have an abortion. That decision, for me personally, forced me to see the deeper choice that I was actually facing. Would I cling to the illusion of control, or would I trust the flow of life? To choose abortion meant that I was choosing control. I was letting the universe know that, hey, okay, I got this. I'm going to handle this from now on, and you can just stay out of it. On the other hand, keeping the baby was a declaration of trust. It was me saying, okay, life, I don't understand. This feels like a really bad joke, but I trust you anyway, all right? And in that surrender, I felt something I didn't expect. Peace, security. You know, it's not the kind that comes from managing outcomes, you know, but it was the kind of peace that comes from aligning with the current and the flow of life itself and letting it carry me somewhere I couldn't have gotten to on my own. So, if you're someone who struggles with needing to have control of everything, especially if it's rooted in anxiety or past trauma, this lesson is for you, okay? Because trying to control your life will only take you so far, and eventually it will freaking exhaust you. And worse, it will rob you of the very peace that you're trying to create. But when you choose trust, when you surrender to what is, you might find that life has a way of working things out in ways that you couldn't even have imagined. Lesson number 3, creation and destruction give meaning to each other. I don't think I fully understood this until I lost my baby on my daughter's birthday. We often talk about creation like it's the highest expression of life. But really, creation and life are only so meaningful because of the ever-present reality of loss and death. The creation of life is meaningful because life ends. And we love harder because we know that we don't have forever with the ones we love. But what about destruction? Is it really the enemy of creation? I don't think so. What I've come to understand is that destruction is what sharpens the edges of beauty and brings it to focus. Destruction is what makes creation matter. Without loss, we'd be asleep in our own abundance, never moved to cherish, to create, or to offer something meaningful before we're gone, before our time expires. So yeah, losing the baby devastated me. But through that loss, I realized that I was being gifted with a deeper sense and appreciation for life. This loss, this miscarriage, gave me a new perspective. I began to see my life and my daughter with brand new eyes. I mean, I had an even deeper appreciation for the miracle that my daughter exists at all, and for the incredible privilege of being the one that she came through. See, it's death that gives life its beauty. Without death, what would give life its significance? It's the very fact that we are not guaranteed tomorrow that makes what we create today, life, relationships, families, art, even this podcast, so meaningful. Creation is sacred precisely because it's temporary. And when you really let that sink in, you can change how you see everything. So to recap, these are the 3 lessons I learned from my miscarriage. Number 1, faith is the key to peace and healing. When you trust that every moment carries meaning, even pain becomes sacred. Number 2, you cannot control life. Control is the illusion of peace. So maybe give surrender a try if you want the real thing. Number 3, creation and destruction give meaning to each other. Creation is sacred because destruction is certain. It's beautiful, really, Destruction gives creation its weight, while creation gives destruction its grace. All right, friends and allies in creating a more beautiful and unified world, thank you so much for spending time with me this week. I really hope this message spoke to you in some way. If it did, please do me a favor and like this video. It helps more people find it and become likewise inspired. I'd also love to hear your thoughts, whether it's on my story or pregnancy loss or the co-creative dynamic between creation and destruction, life and death, or if you just want to share your own story, I'd love to hear about it in the comments section. Also, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on new episodes, which come out every Thursday. This one was a little late though, so I'm sorry about that. Next week, I'm going there. I am going to talk about politics, but not in the way you're probably used to. I'll be sharing what I believe are the deeper spiritual implications of our destructively polarized political landscape. So join me, next week, Thursday. Until next time, stay grounded and embrace the sacred. Love and light, friends.